And now our deep dive today into the new effort to try to make it easier for people to vote and ultimately help get more Americans to the polls. A presidential commission has now released recommendations to do just that. But it does sidestep some of the more contentious political issues that surround the voting process and we see a lot of states fighting about. Instead, it aims for more common sense solutions. The group came up with a pretty simple takeaway, that it shouldn't take any longer to vote than it does to get a pizza delivered, 30 minutes or less. That would be a welcome relief to some voters who waited hours in 2012.
In today's day and age, I think that the line is kind of crazy. I actually put on Facebook that it's about the size of a New York City block wrapped around.
I thought it would be maybe an hour at the tops, but not here 3 hours, but you know, it's worth it.
In Florida, where lines were the worst, some people waited 7 hours to vote. The Orlando Sentinel later reported that more than 200,000 people simply gave up and went home. According to the New York Times, the average wait exceeded 20 minutes in 6 states and Washington, D.C. Now, in his election night speech, as you heard earlier, the president thanked voters who endured the long wait, and he promised to fix it. And he also mentioned this problem again in his inaugural address in 2013 and also the State of the Union. And to drive the point home, he introduced the country to an 102-year-old Desaline Victor, a Florida woman who waited 6 hours to vote, and he promised to make sure it didn't happen again.
When any American, no matter where they live or what their party, are denied that right because they can't afford to wait for 5 or 6 or 7 hours just to cast their ballot, we are betraying our ideals.
During that same address, the president announced the formation of a new commission, and he tapped 2 political veterans from opposite sides of the aisle, former Obama White House counsel and campaign lawyer Robert Bauer and Mitt Romney's top campaign counsel, Ben Ginsberg. And their findings offer a number of broad-based ideas to modernize and streamline the process. Among them, modernizing the registration process through more and expanded online voter registration, expanding alternatives to Election Day voting like mail-in ballots or early voting, increasing the number of schools that are used as polling places to give people better access, frankly, and more comfortable access, and embracing new voting technology. On Wednesday, President Obama praised the badly needed recommendations.
We've got a pretty complex system. We vote a lot. We have local jurisdictions that run these elections, and it makes things a little bit more complicated. The good news is that the recommendations that are contained in this commission report are eminently doable.
The report stayed away from some of the more controversial aspects of the voting debate, like photo ID requirements. Instead, it focused on broad-based solution to the most common problems. So joining me now are the 2 co-chairs of that presidential commission, Bob Bauer and Ben Ginsberg. Gentlemen, you guys do these tandems together before on campaign finance issues, but on election issues. Ben, let me start with you because this is where this becomes a partisan fight, is on access to the ballot. Now, you guys focused more on how the balloting is done in the voting procedure. Why did you stay away from the photo ID issue?
Well, the photo ID issue was beyond the charge that the commission had. The reality of what we did is that Bob and I have spent a lot of years on opposite sides of issues. We've also done a lot of recounts together. Right. When you do recounts, you see that there are real flaws in the American electoral system, and there are solutions for those systems. And so we wanted to be able to come to a bipartisan agreement on some of those flaws that need fixing as a mechanical manner to help make it better for the voter experience for all Americans.
Now, Bob, one thing in the report that you guys mentioned is that, you know, right after the 2000 debacle, we had the Help America Vote Act, HAVA as it's known shorthand, which provided some federal money to jurisdictions. I mean, there were so many, we still had the people pulling the punch cards trying to get rid of that. But you note that we're hitting the 10-year anniversary now of HAVA, which means we're going to have a whole new systems that are now out of date. How are we going to pay for this?
Well, this is one of the striking findings of the commission. We heard unanimously, I mean, literally throughout the hearings that we did, that we are facing a major crisis in voting technology. And so we're going to have to find the will and have the commitment to look at how we begin to set new standards and certify new technologies. And then, of course, there's going to have to be a major effort underway to find the money for it.
You know, Ben, one of the I guess, good or bad things about the voting system is that it's state-run. There is no federal regulator to make sure. I mean, you know, the FEC kind of, Congress sort of overlooks this, but there's nobody really that oversees this process on a federal level. Is that a mistake?
Well,
I'm asking the Republican here, and I know that that's usually...
And our tradition for our entire existence as a country has been that this is a state, and indeed in some places even a town and municipal function. And so there's no magic wand to be waved.
Why is it easier to vote? Should it really be the case that in Oregon it's easier to vote than in Florida? Why should an Oregonian, American that lives in Oregon have better, you know, I mean, then suddenly when we're getting voting...
Why should Floridians have better weather most of the time than Oregonians? There are differences between states. States believe that they're doing it the right way for their people, and that's on-the-ground decision-making for those key decisions. You know, it's the way we've always been as a country, and something I applaud.
Now, one of the things you guys did is you had folks from Disney on your commission because the idea was, how do they manage lines? Well, we know what Disney's done. One of the things they've done is you could basically make an appointment, essentially go on Space Mountain. Is that something you think that states ought to do? Make it you can set if you know you're working from, you know, polls are open 7 to 7. You know you're only going to have, you go and get a ticket in advance that says you get access to the polls from noon to 1. Is it going to be like a lines pass, line skip?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Disney. We did have a very good commission member, a very productive and constructive commission member who was in charge of theme parks at Disney. And he introduced the commission to the sort of industrial engineering analysis that is continuously done. And we're urging in this report that because election administration ought to be viewed as public administration, these industrial engineering sort of solutions, continuous innovation, like you see at Disney.
Using big data to try to figure this out.
And constantly revising ways of looking at things. And you mentioned an example. There may be a variety of ways that you can provide relief from lines and certainty to people about the time periods within which they may be able to vote. And that kind of experimentation, using good, solid industrial engineering thinking, is certainly possible.
Ben, it seems as another aspect of this should be, you talked about polling places are sort of a mess, and schools. I frankly, this was one of the things that surprised me. I have voted in I've been registered to vote in 4 different states over time. I've always voted in a school. I didn't know that 2/3 of the country didn't.
Yeah, it is. And schools are almost uniformly the best physical locations to have polling places, especially in light of the school shootings that have taken place recently. Security concerns are making some school districts rethink that. We feel
you're worried that that's a mistake.
Sure, terrible mistake, because polls are absolutely essential as polling places. The security concerns are real, so we recommend having an in-service teacher training day on Election Day so schools can be used.
And obviously our population, frankly, is not too big to handle voting on one day.
Yes.
Number one, should it be a holiday? Should we be doing it on a weekend? Should we have should it be almost a mandatory minimum 3-week on early vote? I mean, what is it that you guys were trying to go for there?
What we were trying to do is we were trying to address precisely what you just suggested, which is we can't be thinking, in most states, many states don't think anymore about Election Day as just that one traditional day, Tuesday. And so we urge that multiple opportunities to vote before Election Day be afforded to the voters. States have different views about how to provide those alternatives, but those alternatives need to be provided to have the entire country.
You think it should be a mandatory, are you with this, Ben, a mandatory sort of, you should provide some alternative to Election Day voting that's reasonable?
Yeah, voter choice is an important aspect of all legally registered voters being able to cast their ballot. And in this day and age, out in the states, if not in the Washington mindset, in the states, being able to have multiple opportunities is an important thing.
All right. Bob Bauer, Ben Ginsberg, you guys navigated some of these tricky things. Punting photo ID, you think photo ID is still going to be a big fight?
Yes.
Yeah, and if I could say one thing, I'm not sure. I don't know that we punted anything. I think
Fair enough.
I think we took on the charge that we were given, and we tried to, provide really data-based solutions that can be used to affect the voting experience for millions of voters.
Fair enough.
Can I welcome Zachary to the
Well, I was just going to say, you have a new title, Mr. Ginsberg.
I do.
Not just lawyer, you're grandfather.
The best title in the world.
There it is. Congratulations.
Even better than co-chairman of the committee.
And it's a grandson, so the Ginsberg name lives on.
And I have a grandson. Actually, I had a grandson first, a young Samuel, and as usual, Ben's trying to be very competitive.
He is. But of course, his grandson.
He's a role model to us younger guys.
More hair already than Mr. Ginsberg. Anyway, thank you both. My producer's getting so mad at me, we're running out of time.